And first of all, I want to just mention that on this call with me, there are a number of administrators and faculty, but in particular, Cindy Hooper, who is our Director of Operations, and Jamie Valker, who is our school nurse, will be here as well, and they can help answer some questions. So I'm going to present for about 20 minutes. This I basically said before, and then we will use the chat and have time for questions. This is our plan for the night, and you can see it right there. We should be able to hit all of these and have plenty of time for questions. As you probably saw in some of the documents that were sent out last week, these have been our guiding principles. So I think it's important to start here. I will not be reading most of my slides, don't worry. But here I did want to. So number one is prioritizing student, faculty, staff, and family health, safety, and well-being. Number two is delivering a powerful, connected learning experience for students with a strong preference for face-to-face learning. Number three is shaping our policies and practices based on data, research, and up-to-date guidance from local, state, and national agencies with medical and legal experts who have helped to guide us. And finally, providing consistency and predictability for students, faculty, staff, and families. There are always caveats, and here are the three caveats for tonight's presentation. Things are changing rapidly, and this presentation may be partially out of date by tomorrow morning. And we've been needing to plan in that space all summer, but just wanted to remind folks of that. Number two, I am not going to run through the entire reopening plan document. I'm working under the assumption that people have not read that 40 pages from pillar to post, but that you have some familiarity with the basics, perhaps from the executive summary. And three is that the divisional webinars that are going to take place Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are going to get very specific. So there might be questions that are not necessarily appropriate for a full JK-12 audience that might be deferred, and the division heads and division teams will be available to answer questions on those. And as we start, I also just want to say that I would like to extend a very warm welcome to our new families. We have a number of North Shore new families who are with us on the call tonight. And I am sorry if this is the first time that I am meeting you. I look forward to meeting you in person. And I know you have a lot of questions, and we're spending a terrific amount of time in every division specifically answering the question of how we are going to welcome your children into the school. And we're very excited to have them and to have you with us. So as you saw in some of the documents from last week, we are very much hoping that we are able to open in person and open using our half-day hybrid model. How can we do that? Well, we are currently in phase 4 of the governor's Restore Illinois plan. And these things on the screen are some of the guidelines which the Illinois Department of Public Health expects of us even to be able to open. And we are able to meet these guidelines, we feel, with our plans. And we're going to be talking specifically about why that is. Our half-day hybrid remote program with lower and middle schoolers in the morning and upper schoolers in the afternoon. This is why we believe that this is the right plan if we can open. It satisfies all of those guiding principles that I read. It allows us to utilize our modern campus, our updated HVAC infrastructure, and most importantly, that is the way that we have been able to follow the social distancing classroom guidelines that are the key to not only the state requirements, but also the key to following the safety requirements as closely as we can. This schedule and plan also allows us flexibility. And there's flexibility there in two ways, which I think is very important. One, if we need to shift into remote learning, whether the governor tells us we must, or if our school situation suggests that we need to. Our schedule is designed to work for both remote and in-person learning, so there won't be a lot of transition for students. And also there's flexibility the other way. And should we open with this plan and find that we are successful and that all of our measures and risk mitigation has worked well, there's the opportunity to extend the school day longer, possibly for at least some of the divisions. And that could possibly happen too, based on this structure. Finally, one of the reasons that we decided on this plan was that we know that we can achieve it. We don't think that we're over-promising. If we're able to open, we can open on this plan. And this is what the plan looks like. I'm not going to go into much detail here. You've seen some of this before if you've read the documents. But lower school and upper school, lower and middle school in the morning would be on campus. We'll talk about different things like staggered schedules and entrances and things like that. And each division also has a remote learning component. And we'll talk a little bit about how remote learning has evolved since the spring, when we felt that we did a pretty good job, and we think taken it to the next level. All of these, and I should say, all of these slides, this whole presentation will be shared with the school community, as will this recording. So don't feel like you need to take notes or anything. We'll share everything. We also anticipate during this in-person model, the hybrid model, that there will be students for various reasons who are not able to come to campus or who choose not to come to campus. And we are able to accommodate those students primarily by attending classes virtually through a camera setup that the teachers will have and Zoom that allows them during that in-person half of the day to participate in class. It won't be its own separate, unique distance learning protocol. It will be kind of a mix of virtually attending and then having the remote portion of the day after that. And this could be for any various period of time. We also know that depending on how the state situation shakes out, that we may not be able to open. We are certainly planning to, and we think we have a good, safe plan to do so. But if we need to open or shift quickly to remote learning, we are ready, and we've updated the work that we did last spring. I'm not going to go through this entire slide. This is a repeat of the slide that we used back, I think, probably in April, when we were discussing what teaching and learning would look like in a remote environment. But we think that the powerful opportunities to learn, to connect, and to build community can only be augmented from the way we started in the spring. One of the reasons we feel pretty confident about that is that our entire faculty has spent the summer in professional development to advance their understanding of hybrid learning and remote learning, particularly the intersection between them. So lower school faculty have spent a number of weeks over the summer working with the World Leadership School. And that is looking both at what a hybrid learning structure could be, what are the real opportunities of hybrid learning, and the work of developing curriculum that is adaptable to in-person, synchronous, and asynchronous models. The middle and upper school faculty both are in the midst of or have completed a 3-week program through One Schoolhouse, which is a industry leader in terms of online learning, particularly with independent schools. And they have worked with peers from all over the country to adapt their teaching and curriculum into a hybrid teaching environment. So what can you expect in the fall that might look a little bit different than what you saw in the spring? We hope that it's going to take what we did well and replicate it, and take those areas where we can grow and enhance them. So there will, as usual, in incorporate both synchronous and asynchronous work. All of the teachers have trained in order to provide both of those models at a high level. Some of the things that they have spent time on there are listed in that fourth bullet point. And we also feel like we are ready whenever we need to launch into remote learning if we have to. And certainly one of the things that we've learned was that a lot of the opportunities we had for one-on-one work with students in the fall, particularly in the lower school, and group work were particularly well received and distinguished our remote learning from some of our peer institutions. And we're hoping to double down and augment those opportunities with this remote learning structure. This is also something that you can go back to and look at later. This is just best practice in terms of online learning, which is the way that we've tried to structure our work. Okay, obviously one of the most important elements of what we're talking about, and we will certainly have plenty of time for people to come back and ask questions on all of these. I'm not trying to rush, but I do want to make sure that we cover these main elements and then open it up to all of you. So these are the core things that you saw in the document before. There may be, I know there will be specific questions on many of these. These are all of the places that we have used for guidance. This is the wonderful group of North Shore parents who have helped to shape our plan. And they've given a lot of time and careful thought to the work that we've done together, and I'm very grateful to all of them. Brief reminder, station break here. I have not replicated every detail of that plan in this slideshow, and I'll be going through some of these slides pretty quickly. So to the extent that you have questions that might be answered in that full document, I'd encourage you to take a look. Okay, hold on. All right. Masks. This is something that I know is very important. This is non-negotiable. All of the criteria from every country that has done this well, and from the examples that we've seen, is that masks are going to be essential. So everyone will be expected to wear a mask. We have gotten some questions about what is a mask. We know that we're requiring cloth face masks. We do not feel like we are going to get too far into the weeds of defining what they are, but that isn't just necessarily, it's not a bandana. It has to be something that functions actually as a mask. Also, we'll talk a little bit about visitors. Visitors may not come on campus in general, but also they will be required to wear masks, and the teachers as well. One note that I was told the other day that from somebody that I did not put in here was that masks that have air valves in them are not recommended masks. Physical distancing, I mentioned a little bit about this earlier. This is the other key to any plan that's going to be safe for our students and safe for our teachers. And the reason that we have split the day in half is because that is the way that we can get to physical distancing, 6 feet of separation in all of our teaching spaces. So in the lower school, as I mentioned in the document, that is going to look like classes that are split in half. And so each class, each half class, each purple or white group will have their own classroom with their own teacher. And then if they have other teachers who join their class during the day, they come to them with 1 or 2 exceptions. That cohorting model in the lower school is a key element. And in the middle and the upper schools, the cohorts get a little bit bigger as the courses get a little bit more mixed together. And that's why scheduling courses into spaces that are appropriately sized was possible, because we split the day in half. Cindy Hooper, who is on this call, has looked at every single room, has measured it for how many people can fit in that room safely, and have measured the air handling quality in each of those rooms. And of course, we're hoping that we're going to be using outdoor space as much as we can, particularly in the fall. We will have tents for both classes and for kids who don't have a class, particularly upper schoolers, to step outside and to be in the fresh air, and for our teachers as well. So it's this half-day plan and our facilities quality that really allows us to meet all of the recommendations that have to be met in order to consider opening school this fall. Not going to run through all of these in extreme detail, but each student is going to have to complete an online certification with an app. We're going to talk to you more about the app in the next week or so, to verify that they are symptom-free and verify that they do not have a temperature. This is going to be an important part of risk mitigation and keeping people who are unhealthy out of school to the extent that we can. Once students arrive, they're going to be coming to different entrances at different staggered times, and they will also have their temperatures taken upon arrival at school. That's going to be true of visitors as well, although we are greatly limiting visitors this fall for certain. And if you have a propensity as a parent to perhaps come and rescue a child who has left an iPad at home or a field hockey stick at home, that's really not going to be terribly welcome. So there might be some good opportunities for us to help our children, my own included, to think about their executive functioning work and the way that they pack up for their school day. And students are not going to have, in the middle and upper schools, students are not going to have access to their lockers, because lockers are very touchy spaces and they encourage kids to cluster together. So students are going to be asked to bring their materials each day to school and bring them back. Definitely have had some questions since the document came out last week about case management. Obviously, this is something that we're all concerned about. We have a number of the physicians who are on the reopening team who are on this call who might be able to help us, but we're going to be following the guidance that we are getting from local, state, and federal agencies in terms of both how we respond if we have a case and how long people are going to be out to if they are either infected or if they might have been exposed to someone being infected. And I have a little information about that. So should there be a student or a teacher or anybody on campus who is confirmed with COVID-19, these are the steps that'll happen. And basically it is initiating the local protocols with local health officials, and it is initiating our cleaning protocols in a particular set of spaces. Classrooms would be closed and classes in that space would go remote for a day or two. And then we have protocols about people returning to campus, which are here. And this is one that we can get into a little bit later. I'm gonna, hold on, I'm gonna close that chat so I can see. Primary exposure is anyone who is within 6 feet or more for more than 15 minutes with someone who is diagnosed with COVID-19. That's guidance coming directly from CDC and from the Illinois Department of Public Health. Should that be the case, if someone through contact tracing is found to have had primary exposure, there will be a quarantine period in which they will need to spend time off campus and learn remotely. And the benefit of having the remote learning protocols running at the same time is that students will be able to continue with their work should they be healthy enough to do it. Just because someone was in the building at a time that someone might have had an infection does not mean, through the guidance that we've gotten so far, that they need to immediately go home or that they need to quarantine, but will certainly be on need to be on alert. So this methodology of dealing with an infection or a primary exposure is called a symptom-based protocol. We can talk a little bit along the way about testing, but the guidance that we've gotten so far is that the testing protocol is not the one that we should be using. It's a symptom-based protocol, and that is with an abundance of caution. People are quarantined for 14 days, whether a test is showing it or not. And here's a further look at what a symptom-based strategy looks like. This is for an individual who is infected and how they would possibly return to campus. We will obviously continue to hone these as we get further guidance and as the reopening advisory team continues to consider that guidance with their recommendations to us. This is a long slide about how contact tracing works. The local health department would be leading contact tracing, and they would be guiding us in our communications with the school community as well. And obviously there would be communications around infections. They would not include, because of privacy concerns, they would not include names, but anyone who was exposed and was identified through contact tracing would be notified. This again is back on the testing question. You probably don't need to know too much detail here, but we have laid in all of the supplies, procured all of the cleaning materials and masks and hand sanitizers and soap that we need pretty much for the entire school year. And we have pretty thorough protocols in terms of both a day crew and a night crew that will be doing constant cleaning throughout the day. And if there's a case where we need to clean at a higher level, we have all the materials that we need for that as well, and the manpower. And this is just one thing, I mentioned this earlier. We've obviously spent a lot of time looking at our air handling, and it is, I will say, one of the things that really distinguishes our school building from many of the other school buildings around us is not only that we have a lot of space, and so we're able to have these smaller classes, but the overwhelming majority of the campus has been upgraded over the last 10 years in its air handling. And so we already have one of the highest quality air handling systems around, which is a real blessing. And we've spent time over the summer improving those even higher. And so that's a real boon for us. And it's one of the reasons why we feel confident that we can do this plan. One of the things that we'll talk about with members of the school community, starting with you parents, but also with faculty, staff, and especially students, is we all have to pull together in order for this to work. And not only do people have a right to feel that they are safe and to be safe, but that means that it comes with responsibilities. And some of the examples of that down on the bottom include things like off-campus behavior and travel before returning to campus and wearing masks. So as parents, I'm going to urge you for the first of 500 times to take all of this work very seriously so that we can keep each other, keep our teachers safe, keep our students safe. I'm going to go very briefly into still some unformed portions of this plan, given that we just received guidance from the Illinois High School Association just a few days ago. But sports are going to look different, but the athletic department's mission stays the same: to enrich our students' lives through daily participation in sport. And we are going to start slowly. We want kids to be active. We want that for their physical health. We want for their mental health. And so We may not be charging headlong into the fall season as we figure out the different permutations of the state guidance. We're going to progress gradually. We are committed to providing, to the extent possible, fitness and team opportunities for middle and upper school students. Lower school students, as part of their daily schedule, will have physical activity, PE, one or the other as part of their daily routines as well. So what does that look like? We don't fully know. There's a lot on here. But we know there's a few upper school teams right now that can begin as scheduled on August 10th. That's cross country, golf, and girls tennis. There are some other teams that Rebecca Kaufman and Patrick McHugh, our athletic directors, are working furiously right now to create a structure for other athletes in the upper school to begin on August 17th. And they can share some information about that if people would like here, or more likely tomorrow night on the upper school webinar. And then there will be team contact days over the course of the fall. It won't be every single day, but we are committed to having an athletic opportunity for all of our students in the upper school every day. We are also committed to offering middle school fitness or team opportunities each day for Monday through Thursday for the middle schoolers. And we're working on more information to come. Practice times for upper schoolers could be in the morning or in the afternoon. Middle schoolers will be early afternoon. Okay, and then here are some important dates. Starting with some of those athletic, some of those athletic dates. And then the week of August 24th, we have parent and student meetings and orientations. Those are certainly not all day, every day, but you'll be hearing more from the division heads if you haven't already about those dates. And then if we, whether we are live or remote, the first days of school are listed here, the 27th and the 31st. So if you go into the chat, you can use that chat box for typed questions, but I'm also going to turn off my screen share, and so we can see each other. And please use the raise hand button on your screen, and we can answer some further questions that you might have that way as well. And I've got some help from Cindy and Jamie and Jason Giffen, who is helping to drive here. So, okay. It's very strange to talk in that length and not see any responses. But let me pull up the chat here. Oops. Okay, chat. A couple of questions here around what are the criterias for a shift to remote learning? That is one of the key questions of the hour. We have done a lot of work on that. We don't have the most specific answer for that. The most likely answer is that the state will decide that for us. But we also have been talking in our group, in our medical advisory group, around a sort of matrix of data points that would be specific, either external factors in our local community around transmission rates, community transmission rates. Certainly we'd be looking, if we were, probably to 5-7% community transition rate. That's around the area we've been discussing so far. And we also have a matrix of internal variables that would suggest that if we had a certain number of cases in any single division, that might trigger going to remote learning for a division, if not the entire school. And part of the benefit of splitting the day in half is that if we needed to close for a portion of the school, it wouldn't necessarily mean that we would have to close the entire school. Uh, let's see. Please confirm that temperature is taken using electronic means. Yes, we have both forehead temperature guns, and also we have a, this is Hooper, what would you call the other device?
We have a thermal scanner that will be at the main entrance to the upper school being used.
Thank you. Let's see. Will all teachers be teaching in person when school opens under the planned half-day model? It is possible that there would be individual teachers who would not be teaching in person. That's obviously a very sensitive topic, as we have teachers who are anxious about their return and teachers who are in risk categories. And so we're having individual conversations with those teachers who might be in those categories. So it is possible that there would be some teachers remotely, period. Let's see. Are disposable surgical masks fine? Cindy.
Yes, they are. If we're choosing a cloth mask, we're hoping at least to have 2-ply for the cloth, 3-ply if possible. Disposable surgical mask, that's what we currently have on campus for people who forget theirs. And then I see a question, somebody asking about the N95 or even the KN95. If your family's able to get those, we're fine. We're just asking that you don't use the ones with the venting on the side. That's for sure. A bandana or the single-ply buff, as we would call it, the neck gaiter, isn't what we're looking for. We're hoping to get at least 2-ply or 3-ply with the cloth mask.
Thanks, Cindy. And Jamie, obviously, I know you're here. If you'd like to jump in on any of these, please do. I have a question about the lunch plan, which is a great question. Part of also perhaps it's a benefit, some might say it's a benefit, others not, of the half-day plan is that we do not have to worry about the lunchroom, which if you know, our lunchroom is pretty small and has a lot of traffic for about 3 hours. So our current plan is that we will not be offering hot lunch, but that if there are students who would like to pre-order bag lunches through Hand Cut Foods, we can provide that either for lower or middle schoolers who will be going home after their morning classes, or for upper schoolers who might be coming after practice and would like to have something to eat. But we will not be eating in the cafeteria, and it's going to be sort of pre-ordered grab and go.
Exactly.
What will the, let's see. What will the social emotional aspect of the transition plan look like for kids in a school that's very different from what they're expecting? Please feel free to push this question. I think that's a really important part of our discussions, and we've talked about it in all 3 of the divisions. So I think there will be very specific conversations around those in the divisional webinars. But we've really worked hard to not only welcome kids back to campus, but to acclimate them back to campus in the August period. As part of why the lower schoolers are coming back a little bit early, and to get them used to what a sort of a new world is going to look like. And I know all of the division heads and the divisional counselors have been looking at specific ways to do that. Will any classes be taught outside? Yes. They will, but not necessarily regularly. We have not scheduled any classes to be in the South Tent. It'll be more a possibility for teachers to get their kids outside at different times. Obviously, the outdoor opportunity is one we're glad to take advantage of in the fall, and the winter is going to look very different. Regarding air quality, will the classroom windows be open during classes? They will not. Cindy, do you want to explain why?
Yeah, with the newer buildings and our newer systems, which include the lower school, the upper school, art center, auditorium, all those systems have fresh air flowing into the buildings. We're increasing the rate of the fresh air in order for those systems to work at their optimal. We would like to have our windows closed in the building so we create the correct air pressures we need. We also have the ability, as we bring fresh air in the building, to be able to cleanse that air, purify that air through bipolar ionization, which those systems we're adding to our filtering system. So could you open the windows? The answer is yes, but it doesn't create the most optimal system for us to run our systems.
Okay, thanks. Debbie, Cindy, a number of questions around masks still. One is a question about neck gaiters instead of masks, so they don't fall off.
Yes, the neck gaiter would be fine. Again, we want to get more than one ply. So if we fold them over and create more of a 2-ply, if we can get the neck gaiter to be worn that way correctly, of course, that would work fine. So, and I agree, they tend to stay on a little bit better for some people.
I had a question about what happens if a teacher falls ill with COVID. What happens to that class? That's a great question. If the teacher had the possibility, the capability of teaching remotely, if they were not terribly ill, that would be possible. Otherwise, we would have a substitute teacher who would be able to take over that class, just like we would if a teacher was out for a period of time with any other sickness. Let's see. Do you have a rough idea of what percentage of the student body will be attending in person versus online only? We don't have that answer right now. What I can tell you is that by the first week of July, when parents had sort of stopped responding to the first survey that went out, 85% of the parents who responded were in one of the top 2 categories, which was basically, I'm ready for my child to come back, or if you're following CDC guidelines, I'm ready for my child to come back. I would imagine, we have not re-surveyed. I would imagine that number has evolved a little bit as the virus situation has evolved. But we were starting from 85% or so who were ready for their children to come back. More questions on, let's see, on masks. Are masks required while seated at desks? Yes. Will there be a scheduled mask break? Yes, there will. So we've talked a number of that. Will teachers for lower school be wearing clear masks? Cindy?
We're working on trying to source some clear masks for our teachers. We are waiting to get confirmation. They're on back order, as we can imagine. They're being preferred right now by the medical industry versus what we're for schools, but we've got a lead and we're trying to source that. Until then, our teachers will be wearing the cloth mask, and some are going to choose to supplement it with a face shield as well.
Smaller questions. The daily health check, will it be available via app only or online via computer?
Right now it's on, as far as I know, everyone, we're going to be working with a company called School Pass, and it's an app program. I will ask about if it can also be a login just to a computer site as well.
Yeah, so most likely it's going to be an app, but we can check on that. Questions about snack is going to look different across the different divisions, but in general, the answer is that we are not going to be providing snack. Am I correct in that, Cindy? And
you are, Tom. Right now, it's again the guidance is that you want to minimize food on your campus, and if you are making food on your campus, we've got to sort out what that means. We know we have the lunch program set a little bit, but the snack program we think that will evolve for us. I saw a question about drinking water during the day, which we know is a way that we're keeping healthy. And we will be working with each division. We will be encouraging students to bring water bottles because water fountains, as we know them, will be turned off, but we will have supplement with water bottle fillers throughout the day, and working with each division with their breaks to make sure the kids can stay hydrated, as well as the faculty during the day.
I have a couple of questions in here about car line and dismissal policies. I think I'd probably rather wait on those since those are very specific to each division. I think we'll wait on those for the different divisional webinars, but yes, it's going to look different than it did before. And there are plans for those in each of the different divisions. There's also another question which I think is really important that can go to division heads as well, a question about the scope of the curriculum and whether or not the curriculum has been greatly modified or reduced because we have a half-day schedule. The general answer is no, although there may be some specifics in different classes or divisions because there's a combination of two factors. One, including the asynchronous time that has been scheduled, the overall class time is very similar in each division to the academic time of a full day. It's just been rejiggered, and there are some possibilities where projects are just simply looking at a similar set of topics in the same way, in a different way. But each of the individual division heads can get pretty specific about that. And I'm sure there'll be some department heads who can answer those questions as well. Let's see. Drinking, yes, drinking fountains will be closed, as Cindy just talked about, although there'll be some bottle fillers. There won't be regular bubblers, as we called them when I grew up in Milwaukee. And also, can kids wear face shields instead of masks? No. Face shields alone are not sufficient. There have to be masks. It's fine for shields and masks to be worn. Let's see. How about disinfecting devices throughout the day, such as student iPads? Cindy, that's one I don't.
Yeah, well, that one, there will be in every classroom in the buildings as students walk in or as they leave to be able to, one, hand sanitize every time they enter a new teaching or learning space, their classrooms. They will also be able to get a disinfectant wipe to make sure they wipe down their desk and everything. Then this seems to be the next evolution is that being able to wipe down the devices and making sure we have some things available for them to be able to do that. If we are in a situation where people are sharing devices, we have those protocols in place, but I think this is asking us if we can offer some alternatives for people with their own personal devices during the day. So,
Cindy, could you mention a little bit, since I didn't really get into it, could you mention a little bit about kind of how we're talking about cleaning and the nodes in particular and things like that as students, particularly in the middle and upper school, move from class to class?
Yes, we feel that even though we're going to all throughout the day that the students are there, have our day porters assigned to buildings who will be, while the students are in class, going ahead and disinfecting the washrooms as well as the high touch areas throughout the buildings. We'll have people assigned to specific buildings and stuff. But one of the things to help mitigate between classes as we shift in the high school, there may be 4 periods in the morning where a classroom's being used, and as a group is coming out, we feel the need to have kids come in and disinfect the desk because there's just no way possible to be able to sanitize that room without that extra assistance with it. So the students and the teachers will be working on that as we work on the high touch areas. There's a big question about what happens at midday as after the middle school vacates the building, but before the upper school takes over the building. This would include the high school building, the art center, and the science center. We then are going to begin a fogging program in that time to go ahead and do electrostatic cleaning to make sure we disinfect every classroom and every corridor and every bathroom during that time period. So it's all resources available during that time. Then at nighttime, once the students leave, we're going to close the campus about 6 o'clock every night and go ahead and not just clean the buildings as we normally have done. We're going to disinfect and then also sanitize high touch spaces as well. Disinfect everywhere and sanitize where we need to as well.
Thank you. Had a question here about classes. Will they still be able to participate in art, science, and music classes? Slightly different answers across the different divisions, but the general answer is yes. Science for sure, art, yes, and music classes might look a little bit different depending on what division it is, and it might not be if it's a music special, like in the lower school, Linda Kay will still be having class, but it won't be the same sort of singing all the time sort of thing. She's been adjusting her classwork. But the other classes, the science teachers will, the academic classes will be full participation. It might look different in terms of the materials that we use, how we split up lab tables, things like that, and what the activities are that the teachers might be doing in class. I have a question here, and maybe I think I know the answer, but maybe Jamie Valker, the school nurse, could jump in and help me answer that. Sorry, it just disappeared here. If a child tests positive for COVID, will the entire class go to remote learning, and for how long? Jamie, do you want to jump in on that one?
So the feedback that I was reading, it's basically, it's not necessarily the whole class. It would have to do with, the vicinity of everyone. It would sort of, once it's a positive, it goes into contact tracing, and so it has to do with that. So it's not necessarily, there's one positive and then the class gets shut down automatically. It has to do with the vicinity and close contacts and that.
Yeah, so it gets to that primary and secondary exposure piece.
Right.
What you would expect, though, is any of the classrooms that a student, someone who was a confirmed case, it could be a student or a teacher, were in, would be shut down for 48 hours. If it was in a weekend, that would be sufficient. If not, we either find an alternative classroom, or perhaps there's 2 days of remote learning. And then it really depends, as Jamie said, on that proximity, who would be considered primary exposure and who would be secondary exposure.
Right.
There were a couple of questions about resurveying parents around their comfort level with coming back to school. I think we can figure that out. We're getting pretty close here, but it would be, I'm sure, useful for us to know how many parents are still thinking about how this might look. So we can work on that. Let's see. There were a few questions around communication and how we would communicate around a positive diagnosis. Jamie, do you want to jump on that one?
We're still waiting for IDPH and the State Board of Education to kind of lead the way on, obviously it's a health concern, and so there's privacy and there's protection involved with that. And so, we're kind of waiting for a little bit more feedback on who gets told what and when. I think there was a question on there I saw about kind of the lag time between when a positive, if say for, I get information about a positive and then I hand it over to IDPH, and then how long would IDPH take to contact, whoever it needed to be contacted, and that would be on them. I haven't seen any literature, for the school about the lag time that it would take. Cindy, I don't know if you saw anything, but I don't know how fast or slow they work to get in contact with people.
I think right now they're formulating their systems, because once schools become in session, exponentially they'll have to do that. I imagine in the next 2 weeks that there'll be those systems in. We'd be able to contact Trace and we would notify IDPH if a family calls us and says that they've received a positive test, and be able to act on our own with some contact tracing internally. But again, the guidance from either Cook County Department of Public Health or IDPH, the Illinois Department of Public Health, we just don't know at this time, because they don't know exponentially how big contact tracing will be.
Right.
And this is one of the things, as I've been in contact with other school heads in Chicago, it's one of the bigger questions that people are waiting for state guidance to be coming down on in the next couple of days. I got one question here that I've gotten a couple times, and I'm glad it was asked. Will there be a mandatory remote learning period after school breaks, such as Thanksgiving and winter breaks? As of right now, we have not chosen to go that route proactively in terms of going to remote learning, for instance, between Thanksgiving and New Year's. I know a number of the colleges have done that, particularly because they have such international and national populations that are prone to travel. That is still something that we are very much considering and are open to, but we have not said preemptively we're going to lose that 3 to 3.5 weeks of in-person time between Thanksgiving and winter break. It is possible that we would make that decision as the school year starts, and we would do that with plenty of time, probably by the time we got to October or something like that. Let's see. Question about sports, and this is a good question also about transportation. One of the things that that's very important that we're working on is that we know 2 things about this half-day plan. One is it's very predictable for parents, and that's a plus, rather than maybe every other day or rotating weeks or something like that, or on a rotating schedule. We also know that there can be complexities with that for parents for a number of reasons for transportation. So as we said in the survey that went out at the end of June, we are going to be able to offer some aftercare for lower and middle school students, but that is not going to be sort of an optional or an elective. It's really going to be for parents who need that in order for their kids to come to school. And in doing that, there's a lot of logistics, particularly for the lower school, as we try to keep them into their pods, right? So we want to try to minimize the sense that they're crossing across grades, for instance. So that means that there's a lot of staffing involved for us and a lot of logistics, but we are dedicated to offering that possibility, and we're hopeful that the athletic program is going to be able to keep kids active before and after school. For upper schoolers who might need to come to campus earlier than noon, if they have a morning practice, we'll have a dedicated space where upper schoolers can spread out and before that, or if there's a transportation need, like someone who has to arrive early because of their transportation need, we'll be able to accommodate that by having separate spaces for upper schoolers as well. A couple of questions about hotspots and quarantine. This is a really tricky one. And so what our stance is as a school is that if you are coming from a hotspot, you need to quarantine for 14 days before you come to school. We can't really enforce that. We are not going to be scouring people's Facebook and Instagram pages to see where they might be traveling. It really is going to rely on trust and our combined collective hopes to keep all of our kids safe. So I know that's not an easy one, but I think it's just part of that understanding. And as far as hotspots, I think there are currently a number of states that are listed as hotspots, and I believe, I can look at this, I believe Johns Hopkins has a categorization of that. Let's see. Will parents have the option to be able to drive their student athletes to and from practices or matches instead of taking the bus? Mr. McHugh or Ms. Kaufman, do you want to try to answer that question? I think they're on. Maybe. Patrick McHugh, I see you on here. Maybe you've stepped away for a moment. Okay. And then I do have a question, and this I may not be the right person to answer this around, and it's seeing that it's 8:05, we'll wind down in the next 5 to 10 minutes. A question around the quarantine process for someone who is diagnosed in 14 days. I've had 1 or 2 questions about whether or not 14 days, 10 plus or close to 14 days is enough quarantine to ensure that someone is still not infectious. So that could be Jamie, or that could be one of the members of the medical advisory team who is on as well. If you want to unmute yourself. Okay.
I mean, yeah, well, that's what the CDC and the IDPH is saying. For me, I don't know how else to.
My thinking is that if no one from our medical advisory comments right now, which is absolutely fine, that we bring it to them and get that. But right now we're following the IDPH and CDC recommendations, but it is something we should look into, talk to the people on our team and just ask ourselves some questions about that, learn more information. So I wrote it down.
Mm-hmm. I did too.
Yeah. And that is a question that was vetted. Those details were vetted by that advisory team off of CDC and IDPH, and we can go back to them with the specific question I have on here, and I can follow up with this parent.
Want me to speak now, Tom?
Yeah, Mr. McHugh, I unmuted you. I guess I had that ultimate power.
First of all, good evening, everybody. We're looking forward to a great year of athletics at North Shore. It will be an unusual one, and we do think there will be some evolution. In fact, I was in a 2-hour webinar with the IHSA today. There are ongoing adjustments to protocols in athletics around the state. So what I say tonight, as Tom has already said, could change tomorrow. I think there was one question about transportation. The initial recommendations from the National Federation of High Schools has been that schools partner with parents. So I think there's a parent here who asked about, can we give our own children rides? We would very much appreciate that at this point. And that would, if children can get themselves either by driving themselves, biking, walking, getting their parents to the sites, that would be great. We will be attempting, and we're waiting for kind of further guidelines on school transportation, and we'll be able to update that. But as far as the first couple of weeks, if parents want to chip in and transport their children, that would be tremendous. There was one question about storage of golf clubs. I think the best recommendation at this point is that is a piece of personal equipment, and personal equipment has to go home every night.
Yeah.
So although we'll be able to store during the school day, and Ms. Hooper and I are working on a site to do that on campus, it will have to go home and come back every day.
Thanks, Patrick. I have another question here that hasn't come up before about the nurse's office. How are we handling traffic in and out of the nurse's office, i.e. kids who need the nurse versus kids who might be potentially infected? And I think we have a really good balance of things as I look at Jamie, shaking there. Jamie is going to be working with all of our teachers to help them help them perhaps think about when they need to send a student to the nurse in the first place. We can have Band-Aids in classrooms and things that the kids can put on themselves and things like that. But we also have already identified an isolation space. So any time that there's a sense that anyone might be symptomatic, they'll be, if I'm correct, Jamie, they'll be moved to that isolation space where they'll be supervised, and they'll be out of the flow of the regular buildings as fast as you have the possibility. But we're looking to also decrease routine traffic to the nurse's office wherever possible. Is that fair? Here, I'm going to, actually, Richard Phillips, thank you.
Yes.
I'm going to unmute you if you wouldn't mind saying what you just wrote. Hold on. I don't know why that's not unmuting.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Hi, Tom. I just wanted to address the concern about the 10-day quarantine after a positive diagnosis. That's become the industry standard over the last few months. At my hospital system, we do hold a 10-day quarantine for all employees who have tested positive. So that is the standard. And with regards to people testing positive beyond that 14-day period or 10 to 14-day period, you can test positive and not necessarily be infectious. The way the test works is that it checks for virus, and that virus can be dead virus particles that will test positive, but the patient's no longer actively infectious. So we should feel comfortable with the 10 to 14-day threshold that's been outlined in the plan.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Chethra, I unmuted you as well. Anything you would love to add?
No, I think Dr. Phillips summed it up. I totally agree.
Great. So I think we didn't get to everything, but I think we got to almost all of the questions that were relevant to most of the three divisions. We will have some specifics, and there have been some questions about bathrooms and how bathrooms will be managed. Those will also be division specific, and we can answer some of those questions. One of the things that I would steer you to, if we didn't have a chance here, is in the documents I sent out last week, there is an email address, COVID@NSCDS. And if you send a question to that address, it will go immediately to me, to our assistant head of school, Mary Fielder, to Cindy Hooper, and to Jamie Valker. And if one of us isn't the right person to answer the question, we will forward it on to the appropriate administrator to answer your questions. Some of the questions we got over the last few days found their way into the slides that we did today. So, I'd just like to say thank you to Cindy and to Jamie, but also to all of our teachers and faculty and staff and administrators who have been working all summer to pull these plans together. We're doing it, we know, in a bit of a vacuum of information, and you know, we will be continuing to monitor things over the next few weeks. We hope that we can open. We hope that we'll be able to do what we're saying that we're doing here. And if not, we will open remotely and we'll do it really well. But please feel free to reach out with further questions. I hope you will attend the divisional webinars that are coming up, and look forward to, really hope to seeing you in person, maybe from a car, and to seeing your students sometime in the next couple of weeks. So thanks everybody, and I hope you all have a great night.